Okay, welcome to the July 2025 Tourism Management Editor Office Hour. We're here for 1 hour to answer any questions that you may have about tourism management or about publication in general. So I don't have any set agenda. I don't have anything particular to share, but I'm here to answer your questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to turn on your audio or your camera to ask question. Of course, you're welcome to use the chat box as well. Okay, I see a question in the chat box. When submitting an abstract, is it required that I have already completed part of the research? Or can I just share my ideas? Also, should the abstract include references? I assume you're talking about submitting abstract to a conference for presentation because other journals will require completed studies. So if you're talking about conferences, then that depends on, you have to look at the conference submission guidelines, whether it's work in progress. Different conferences have different tracks. Some conferences offer full paper submission track for completed studies. And then there are other conferences that will offer work in progress, especially for early career researchers. If that's the case, then you can submit maybe just an initial idea, your proposal, or if you are as part of your study, you have done some, for example, you have done data collection, but you haven't finished the data analysis, but you expect when the conference actually take place, you would have completed the data analysis, and then you have the results. Of course, then you can report whatever you have in the abstract and then say this will happen before the conference. So depending on the track of the conference. So I assume that's the question. We just compiled the volume 111, volume 111. We have 40 some publications in that volume. You're welcome to take a look. We have 2 progress papers. Those are narrative review papers, not systematic review, not bibliometric review, but more of a narrative review to summarize what have been done and what are missing and looking at the future. So those are more on a theoretical discussion rather than mechanical counting how many papers have been published in different categories. So we have 2 of them. And those papers are usually very well read and very well cited. And then we have 2 special issues ongoing. We have a couple of maybe 3 papers published in volume 101 relating to the 2 special issues. And then, of course, there are regular full-length articles there as well. So we just compiled that. You're welcome to take a look at the articles. And the link has been provided in the chat box. Just a reminder for anybody who's maybe interested in submitting to special issue, different special issue editors will have different guidelines in addition to the journal guidelines. For example, currently we have 1 special issue open for submission, but the authors are required to submit an abstract to the guest editor for initial review. So they will do the initial review of abstract. And for those abstract pass the initial review, then the author will be invited to submit articles through the journal system website. So if you submit anything directly through the journal website without going through the abstract review process, then the paper will be most likely that's rejected or ask you to resubmit under the regular article track. So make sure you read the call for papers posted on the website. We currently only have 1 special issue that is still as accepting abstract, and the abstracts need to be sent to the guest editors rather than the journal. I was asked of a question recently, not from the office hour, but I was asked a question recently about for a study, what does it take to be published in top journals? Because a study could be a good study, but then you submit it to a top journal, it gets rejected. The authors will wonder, why does it get rejected? Because authors thought that that's a very good study. So one thing that I would advise is not only you need to have a good study, for example, you have a series of experiments, survey, big data analytics, everything is right, but then the critical part is you need to tell a good story. Very often the journal editors don't, of course, we understand how much work you have put into the research process, but we are looking at the way you present the study. So make sure that you have, yes, you have the methodological rigor, that's a must, but then on top of that, how do you tell the story? You need to find a theoretical gap. You need to identify the current theoretical shortcomings and how this study can address that, and how do you frame your study so that you can enhance a particular theory, address the weaknesses, and therefore what theoretical contributions does your study make? So it's not only about having a good study, it's about how you present your story. So writing takes practice. Somebody will say writing is an art. But from an academic paper writing perspective, I would see paper writing as a craft. As an art, you can argue that I don't have the talent for art, like you don't know how to paint, you don't know how to sing. I mean, those are art presentation, but for a journal article, I think it's a craft. A craft that you can learn. As long as you practice often enough, then you can master the craft. So I will encourage you to practice writing, practice storytelling, so that the reviewers will say, oh yeah, I think not only this is a good study in terms of the rigor of the methodology, but also you're presenting the study in a way that we can see the value of innovativeness and pushing the knowledge boundary. So yes, in addition to learning the skills of doing research, you need to have methodological tools, but at the same time, you need to learn how to present your study, present your work in a way that people will see the value of your work. All right. The question in the chat box is, could you introduce the topic of special issue? What are you looking for? The abstract for a special issue submission must be sent using the first author's email address. I think the link is provided for the currently open special issue. You can take a look at the examples that the guest editors provide. So it's not what I'm looking for, it's what the guest editor defined in terms of the scope of the special issue. In terms of the abstract, I would suggest you to send email by the corresponding author, because by the time you have an abstract, you must have a very good idea in terms of the scope of the study, the team, and therefore you will have an idea of who will be the corresponding author. So it will be the best if you can have the corresponding author identified already, and then the corresponding author send the abstract to the guest editor, because again, different editorial teams work differently. For example, one of the special issue that we have, they keep an Excel file. For example, all the abstracts submitted, the corresponding author, they only know the corresponding author's email. Therefore, when they say, okay, please, if you're invited to submit a full paper through the editorial manager system, then the special issue editor will look at whether this particular author's paper has been invited to submit. So if the corresponding authors is not on the list in the Excel file, they may say, I'm sorry, we didn't invite you to submit this particular paper. So they go through a two-stage review process, the initial abstract review, and then the subsequent submission review. So in that case, it will be much better if even the original submission abstract is sent by the corresponding author for better record keeping on the part of the guest editor. The next question regarding IRB, Institutional Review Board requirement. If I use publicly available data or resources from tourism websites such as Airbnb, do I need to apply for a special IRB approval before I submit my paper? It depends on, it's up to your institution. So just follow your institution's requirement. If your institution requires review, even when you use online data, online big data, then you need to go through your institutional review board for approval. So for journals, I don't think journals are the gatekeeper for ethical approval. We rely on institutions. So as long as your institution approves your study, provided funding to your study, then we assume it's good to go. Although reviewers sometimes will ask, especially if you study in a sensitive topic area or a potentially this underprivileged group, or for example, children, or any particular group of people with some health issue, then the reviewers may ask for details about institutional approval. But as long as your institution approves the study, if your institution allows you to do the study, then journals usually take it on face value. I have really seen reviewers ask for proof, ask for a copy of your institutional review board approval letter. So a lot of the academic research is based on researcher ethics, so we trust what you say. Yeah, so rely on your institution's guideline. Going back to the question about submitting abstract, I was talking about submitting conference presentation abstract. Since somebody asked a question about special issue, then yeah, special issue also very often requires an abstract submission. In that case, then you don't have to have the study completed. It's an initial indication of the topic area, but then you need to have a very specific scope of the study already defined. For example, what are the objectives and what is the data collection process, methods used, and what do you expect to be the innovation or creation or contribution of the study. Once your abstract is accepted, then you can go ahead and carry out the study. But then usually that needs to be happening very quickly, because usually special issues have a pretty quick turnaround, maybe 3, 4, the most 6 months time for you to do the study. So everything needs to be laid out already at an abstract stage. There's a question in the box. May I ask, what is the acceptance rate? How about special issue? Any difference? I cannot speak for other journals. For tourism management, there is no difference in terms of special issue. We require the special issue editors to use the same standards as regular issue. So all the papers accepted by special issue editors actually need to go through one of our regular editors, either myself or our associate editors, to ensure the same quality. We do rely on guest editors' judgment, because usually the special issue topic areas are their expertise, but then we also review all the papers before the special issue papers are accepted. So we use the same standard. To answer your question, what is the first question? The first question? What is the acceptance rate? It's usually between 7 to 9%, I would say. We don't have a specific number, because there is a time lag between submission and acceptance. For example, last year, 2024, we received 2,230 submissions, but then not all of them go through the review process and have the final decisions, accept or reject before the end of 2024. So some of the 2,000 plus submissions, they don't get a specific answer until 2025. So it's difficult to calculate the exact acceptance rate, but usually we publish just under 200 papers a year, about between 180 to 190 some papers a year. And if you take that divided by 2,200 some, then that's usually 7 to 9%. The next question in the box is, if the author did not disclose the use of AI tools when first submitted the manuscript, however, during the revision process, they use AI tool to assist with language polishing, should the author disclose this use of AI technology? Now, yes. Whether it's initial submission or resubmission, the authors are required to declare how they use AI tools. It doesn't matter at what stage. So at the current time, all we ask is the authors to declare the way that they use AI. And then the follow-up statement is, in the case that my abstract, oh, this is a different question. In the case that my abstract is not accepted for the special issue, would it still be possible to submit a full manuscript to tourism management as a regular submission? Yes, it is possible. The guest editor may just reject your abstract based on a number of reasons. And one possible reason is that it doesn't fit the scope of the special issue. Then for special issue, we don't have any particular scope because tourism management define tourism very broadly, using a liberal approach to define tourism. So yeah, if it doesn't fit the scope of the special issue, for example, currently the open special issue is about reimagining power and agency. If it doesn't fit that, however, if it's a good study, then yes, it could still be considered for regular issue. Given that the stage 1 manuscript consists only of research proposal without empirical studies or conclusion, how is the quality of the research assessed? I think, again, you're still talking about the special issue. I think the guest editor will look at the potential. Number one, whether it fits the special issue defined scope, whether the topic fits the scope, and would look at the way you plan to conduct the study, and then the potential contribution. So again, at this stage, they rely on you to tell them how does it fit and what is the potential value. And of course, the stage 2, then they will review the rigor. So going through the stage 1 doesn't guarantee the acceptance of stage 2. Simply means we like your study, we see potential, we would like to see the full paper. Basically, the stage 1 abstract review is that. So the next part of the question is, if the stage 1 manuscript is approved, does that guarantee the publication of the final paper? So I just answered that question. No, it doesn't, regardless the outcome of the subsequent data analysis and the conclusion. I don't think they make acceptance or rejection decision based on the results. The full paper will be reviewed based on quality. So you don't have to support all the hypotheses that you proposed. That's a problem in the current publication landscape. Many people have talked about that. And also that's an incorrect assumption that you have to support all the hypotheses you propose. If we 100% support our hypotheses, then there's no need to hypothesize, right? Because we know we will support, the finding will support the hypothesis. Then we know that as a fact already. So whenever we conduct studies, very likely some of the hypotheses are supported, some are not. So for the stage 1, Just give you an example of the previous special issues that we had. Initially, they may have one of the special issue, you may want to read the editorial by the special issue that we just concluded on mental health. A traveler with mental health issues. Initially, they tell you how many abstracts were submitted, how many abstracts were invited to submit full paper. So there is a screening process, and then of the full paper submitted, eventually how many were accepted. So again, that addressed this question that stage one, going through the stage one abstract review doesn't guarantee the publication of the full paper. It depends on how you conduct the study, because in stage one, it's likely that you haven't conducted the study, you're just proposing that idea, and then of course, then depending on the quality of your final paper write-up, the story that you're telling, and also the quality of the study methodology and so forth. All right, the next question is by Jesse. If a paper gets rejected after review, but the authors made major revision based on the feedback, for instance, simplifying the research model, are we encouraged to resubmit it? Is it better to submit it to another journal? I think most of the tourism journal, if I understand correctly, you cannot resubmit once a decision is made. You only get one chance with each journal. So if you take the reviewer's comment, make all the revisions required, you're welcome to submit to another journal. But because now in all the journal review system, for the same paper, even if you change the title slightly, I don't think you can completely change your abstract because it's the same study. The system will pick it up, and then it will be automatically rejected. So yeah, that's why we stressed many times, it is important to get your paper to the best possible way you can before you submit, because you only get one chance with each journal. Recently, I focused research policy design to promote sustainable tourism. I pay attention to the same policy in different contexts, display different results. So I use context mechanism output model connected with stimulus organizing response. I'm afraid this paradigm is out. If I mix two old model into a new paradigm, do you think it is enough innovation? Well, it depends. It's hard to say. First, you need to, it's just like any other theory. It's not only about this, right? So generally, if you want to integrate, very often we see our authors saying that I integrated theory A and theory B, therefore that's an innovation, and reviewers will come back and say why. So you need to identify before you integrate anything. For example, you have theory A, you have theory B, and you use them together. The first question is, what are the shortcomings of theory A and what are the shortcomings of theory B? Why should they work together? How can they work together? What is the rationale for putting them together? How do they complement each other? Then by putting them together, do you address the shortcomings you identified earlier of theory A and theory B? If you do, then yes, you solve the problem, because for any literature review, the reviewer will say, what do you know? What are the shortcomings? What are the gaps? And how can your study address that? So it doesn't matter what theory you use. You need to say, okay, the limitation of this is, and the way I do it, therefore, I can address that limitation. So it's the same as what you're indicating here, or about any other theories. We've seen a lot of studies that combining, for example, 2 or 3 or even 4 sometimes theories in one study, that is fine, but doing that alone is theory stacking. You're putting one theory on top of another, rather than truly integrating them together, making any of them better, right? So if you just throw 4 into a study, do you make any of them better? That's the whole point in terms of theoretical contribution. The next question is, I'm preparing to submit a research article. I noticed that articles in 2025 are almost around 13 pages, while in 2024, they hardly exceed 17 pages. Could you please advise on what would be an appropriate page length for initial submission? Well, the guideline says full papers are about 10,000 words. Although we don't have a specific word count, we try to be flexible so that authors can say what they want to say, but usually we say 10,000 words, but plus minus probably 10–15% or more than that. Because you're writing a research article, you are not writing a book. And the reviewers will very often, if you have a very long article, they will come back and say, it's not condensed enough. You're not saying in a way that's succinct. Everybody likes to read a succinct story. I'm not sure about the length of the articles published. I haven't done any calculation or tabulation in terms of 2024, 2025, but we're trying to, and the reviewers will tell us that, we're trying to help the authors to tell a very streamlined, focused story. And you are all readers, so you know, when you read a paper that is very, very, very long, you tend to lose interest halfway through. So you want people to stay focused and stay interested in your paper. So that's why earlier I said writing journal papers is a craft. You have to learn the craft through practice. There are a number of different ways that you can say what you want to say. You can use 500 words, or you can use 200 words. How do you reduce that 200 to 200 words? Then that's a craft. So yeah, there's no easy way around, just need to practice. But not having a hard limit is not for you to take advantage of the fact that you can write loosely, right? Because if your paper is too long, then like I said, people may lose interest or lose track of what you're trying to say. Right. The next statement in the comment box is, I'm doing an experiment with a new invented equipment, although there is similar equipment in the market, but expensive. So it is not from the world famous equipment. Is that possible? How could I explain this part? Well, you just explain the functionality of the equipment, and I assume you're not an inventor. I assume there is some information out there, as long as you can provide a reference, cite a reference, so that interested readers can review that equipment. That should be fine. You need to, of course, explain if it's something that has not been used before, then you need to explain the accuracy or the reliability and refer that to in the reference for anybody interested. Because the whole point of publishing the details is that somebody else can replicate the study if they wish. Then if it's equipment that will be or is publicly available, whether it requires access, for example, you have to pay to have access. That's a different story, but at least you need to make the information available so that people can judge by themselves the quality of the equipment or suitability of the equipment for the particular research that you're doing. So you just need to provide as much information as possible about that piece of equipment. If any of you are reviewers, I do hope you are reviewers for the different journals. Very often we hear the editors talking about how difficult it is to recruit reviewers because it takes a lot of time for for all of us to review each and every piece of research that come to our desk. There are some advantages of being reviewers because you get to see the most current research being conducted in the field. So you learn what's happening. And I'm sure you can learn, I do, learn how other people write, how other people present, whether you see the strengths or the weaknesses. Obviously, as a reviewer, you can make recommendations to authors how to improve their writing, how to improve their presentation, and you can spot any missing information. And I think that would help you as an author as well. Because once you see others not doing that, the next time you write up your own article, then you will be reminded you need to put in additional information that you remember, oh, somebody else missed that, therefore I need to include that in the next article that I write. So there are learning opportunities for reviewers. Therefore, I would strongly encourage you to serve as a reviewer, whether it's for conference, presentation submission, or for different types of journals. And on TriNet, I think quite often, on and off, you will see authors and reviewers and editors will say, as a rule of thumb, for every article that you submit to a particular journal, you are obligated to review 3 papers because for each submission, you get 3 reviews, right? So for each submission, then you need to offer 3 reviews in return as well. Otherwise, we will be running out of reviewers very quickly. And if we don't get enough of reviewers, the review process will become longer because it takes time to find reviewers. So if you ever get a chance to be a reviewer, please accept that invitation and do a good job. Because as authors, you are all benefiting from the insights from the reviewers. So when it's your turn to be a reviewer, do help others. Not that one person is better than the other. It's just when other people look at your writing, they can always find things that you cannot find yourself, even for myself as well. I thought I did a good job of writing the paper, therefore I submitted it, but reviewers will identify things that I did not think about because we become too familiar with our own work. We don't see what's missing. So it's always good to serve as a reviewer, to look at other people's writing, and that's the way how you learn as well. So if you submit a paper to a particular journal, be mindful. If you get a review invitation one day from that journal, for every review you receive, you owe that journal back 1 review. So for 1 paper, if you get 3 reviews, then you should feel obligated to offer 3 reviews in return. That's how the academic communities work. And as an author, you probably have that experience receiving a review, whether it's positive or negative, but they don't tell you much. So as a reviewer then, again, you need to be reminded that you should provide very detailed comments to the authors, whether if you especially if you recommend rejection or major revision, then there must be good reasons provided. Otherwise, the authors will feel like, okay, you're rejecting my paper, but you don't tell me why. And also, when we send out invitation to reviewers, we remind the reviewers that they should serve as mentors. Actually, that's a challenge sometimes because we do hear from the authors. The authors said, well, the reviewers are all very, very constructive in their comments. So they wanted to help us to do a good job with this paper. Then how come my paper get rejected, right? Actually, that's the purpose of we encouraging the reviewers to serve as mentors. Even though the paper may not be suitable for tourism management, but we want to help the authors to make improvements so that they can find another outlet for publication of this work. So sometimes the reviewers are very polite, very constructive, provide good comments, but they tell the editor separately in confidence that I don't think this paper is suitable for tourism management. So we send out the positive, the constructive, the kind comments to the authors to help the authors improve the paper, but still the paper could be rejected. And there is a reason for rejection because there is a confidential comment box for the reviewers to tell the editors what they truly think. So sometimes we see a little bit of confusion there, but that's unavoidable. Not always. There's another question in the chat box. I once reviewed the reviewer's comment. The current application of the theory is superficial, offering only broad connections without detail. Can you please give us some advice how to more deeply embed the theory into the findings and interpretation? Well, depending on you're talking about qualitative piece or quantitative piece. I think rather than saying this study the findings can be interpreted by this theory or the findings aligns with the theory. In this regard, I think the authors are looking at more reflective. For example, how can this study address a particular shortcoming, limitation, and that you set up in the literature review? And how can the study, and also depending on the theory. Some theories are more complex than others. But I think the reviewers would like you to go beyond just citing the theory and saying the study findings align or does not align with the theory. But again, further explain why. If it's a qualitative piece, then yes. We've recently actually seen reviewers make that comment as well. Especially with qualitative piece, then you get a lot of different pieces of data from the qualitative, whether it's text or image or some other forms of data, which piece of information fit into which part of the theory, and so I think they're looking for beyond simply mentioning the theory, but going into the premise of the theory, maybe going back to the origin of the theory, the assumptions of the theory, and do the findings reflect that? So it's more in-depth discussion rather than simply mentioning. I've seen quite some comments from reviewers saying that this is simply mentioning the theory stacking or citation is not theory, and so really need to have more in-depth discussion of how each and every different piece of major findings. For example, if you do qualitative study, then you will do the multi-layers of coding, and when you did the coding, how does the theory play, what role does the theory play in terms of helping with identifying the things and integrating the different subcodes into a higher level code and so forth. So they're looking at throughout your writing, make sure that your theoretical underpinning thread through the discussion of interpretation of your finding. Yeah, I know it's a bit abstract and I cannot give you an exact answer because every situation is different, but I do see comments coming back from the reviewers mentioning what you're saying. Just some basic information here. I think we've shared this in previous sessions as well. Make sure you read the author's guide. Each and every journal has a different set of guidelines. So you make sure that you follow the guidelines of the journal that you submit to. If unfortunately your paper get rejected by a particular journal before you submit it to a different journal, you need to read the guidelines provided by that second journal because it could be very very different in terms of formatting, in terms of word count, in terms of highlight requirements, abstract length, and tourism management requires the impact statement, which is unique. And so whether the tables and figures need to be within the text or at the end of the text, every journal is different. So make sure that you read the guide for authors before you submit a paper to a different journal. There's one additional question in the chat box. The experimental results for each individual's heart rate, skin conductance, EDA brain activity, EEG, and eye movement may differ. How can this be replicated? Even results for the same person might vary across different testing sessions. Will you accept this kind of paper? Well, you're not reporting just one person, right? And so you are reporting a pattern. So these are the technical issues. Of course, there will be variation, but the whole point about doing academic research and writing up academic journal papers is contributing to theoretical development. Anything can be a theory, needs to be generalized, right? For example, gravity theory, whether the apple tree is in China or in Australia or in the United States, an apple will fall to the ground. That's the gravity, right? Of course, the soil is different, the weather is different, the wind speed is different in different geographic area, but things fall to the ground, and that's the gravity. The same thing here, if you're trying to, whatever topic you're talking about, whether you're talking about emotion, whether you're talking about experience, well-being, mental health, that's why you're using those EDA or ECG or eye movement data to track. You're not reporting individual perspiration, heart rate, body temperature, but you're looking at a phenomenon on a general level, whether this activity contribute to better well-being, for example. Then, of course, you need to have experimental group, control group, or longitudinal tracking, or, so I don't see that as an issue because we're looking at patterns that can be generalized, which is the foundation for theory development, right? The question in the box is, if a paper is about the rebranding of a border city into a tourist destination from critical discourse, it is more city rebranding. Will you accept it? Well, city rebranding is a topic. We accept any topic. So yes, as long as it makes good theoretical contribution, it is within the scope of tourism management. So the study context doesn't matter. The topic doesn't matter. We're looking at stories where you identify a knowledge gap, a theoretical gap, a methodological shortcoming, and how your study can address any of the issues that you identify. So we're not selecting topics, we're not selecting methods, and we're not selecting study context. Those are your choice. We're only looking at the quality of the methodology and your contribution to knowledge.